reinforce partnerships with other regions. So, this will lead to a full regulatory cooperation for 2026 to 2027 through AFRAF's leadership. Together, we are shaping a safer, stronger, and more innovative African food system for generations to come.
في عام 2018 تم تخصيص يوم عالمي من أجل الحفاظ على سلامة الأغذية من قبل الأمم المتحدة، وهذا من أجل الحفاظ على سلامة المستهلكين، حيث يوافق اليوم العالمي لسلامة الأغذية اليوم 7 من شهر يوليو من كل عام. ويشكل اليوم العالمي لسلامة الأغذية فرصة لتوعية الناس بالقضايا المتعلقة بسلامة الأغذية والتأكيد على أهمية الحصول على غذاء صحي وآمن ومغذي لكل إنسان. كما يعد هذا اليوم فرصة للترويج لحلول وطرق لتحقيق المزيد في مجال سلامة الأغذية ومناقشة مقترحات تطوير منظومة سلامة الأغذية عبر كافة حلقات السلسلة تداول الغذاء، بهدف توجيه الانتباه إلى ضرورة دعم الحلول المبتكرة لاستدامة الغذاء ووضع الخطط الكفيلة بتوسيع نطاق الابتكارات والاستثمارات في الصناعات الغذائية والزراعية.
ده تسهيل تبادل المعرفة والقدرات وتطوير استراتيجيات المختلفة بسلامة الغذاء، والعمل على توحيد الحلول وتعزيز الشراكات وتشكيل أدوات التعاون بين الهيئات وبين قطاع الصناعات الغذائية والزراعية. لذلك تسهيل الخبرات الجماعية من خلال التواصل وتبادل الأفكار والرؤى مع القطاع الخاص وشكل أدوات تكامل العمل مع مختلف المؤسسات والهيئات والوزارات الوطنية والمنظمات والهيئات الدولية بالنسبة المشتركة إزاي استدامة منظومة الغذاء محليا ودوليا.
وتعمل الهيئة على تعزيز الثقة بسلامة الغذاء من خلال تصميمها لمنظومة رقابية غذائية متكاملة وفقا لأفضل المعايير والممارسات المحلية والإقليمية والعالمية.
وتشريعات سلامة الغذاء. زائد الطلب على خيارات الغذاء الصحي أصبح المستهلكين أكثر وعيا وذكاء وانتباها للخيارات الغذائية. هذا كله الحادث في تكنولوجيا الصناعات الغذائية والتصنيع الحديثة والمتطورة في مجال التعبئة والتنمية شكلت قفزة نوعية مؤثرة في هذا المجال.
نسعى لتوحيد جهود القطاعين العام والخاص والهيئات المتعددة الأطراف والجهات الفاعلة في المنظومة الغذائية لبناء منظومة غذاء مستدام تضمن سلامة الأنظمة الغذائية واستدامتها وفق أعلى المعايير العالمية وتوفير أفضل مقومات الصحة والسلامة الغذائية لكافة المستهلكين.
صاحب زيادة مشروع ممنوعة من السلام بسرعة جديدة مثل المواد البلاستيك الحائل أو المواد القابلة للتحلل والقابلة لإعادة التدمير، المواد البلاستيكية استخدامها لأغراض المواد من لبس الغذاء، استخدام تقنيات الذكاء الاصطناعي والتكنولوجيا في إنتاج الغذاء. كل هذه التقنيات كانت تشكيل بيئة وقابلة للتطور للرقابة على الغذاء، والحرص تدعم وتتيح فرصة لتبني أنشطة ومبادرات للأمن وإدارة هذه التغيرات المنتصرة. وأصبح على الهيئة ضبط هذه التغيرات الحاصلة في هذا القطاع والذي يعد المفتاح الرئيسي للقدرة الوسيلة لصناعة الأغذية في الوقت الحاضر.
إن سلامة الغذاء مسؤولية يشترك فيها جميع من يعملون في قطاع الصناعات الغذائية والزراعية، ولدينا جميعا دور مهم في تحقيق الأمن الغذائي، وعلينا جميعا مسؤولية دعم منظومة سلامة الغذاء والتعاون مع الشركاء في قطاع الصناعات الغذائية والزراعية لإحداث التغيير.
استفاد من على سلامة الغذاء من المستوى الوعي وشأن ظروف تساعد من خلالها على بناء سلامة الغذاء وأهميتها. ومن الأولويات الأربعة من التغذية والحياة أفضل الدنيا.
لذا دعونا نستفيد من اليوم العالمي لسلامة الغذاء للنهوض بمستوى الوعي بشأن أهمية سلامة الغذاء وضمان توافر غذاء صحي وآمن للجميع.
Africa stands at a pivotal moment. A continent rich in agricultural heritage, dynamic markets, and evolving food systems, now united by a shared ambition to ensure safe, resilient, and innovative food for every African citizen. In 2023, African food regulatory authorities came together in Cairo to make history. The Cairo Declaration established the African Food Regulatory Authorities Forum, AFRAF, a collaborative network to strengthen the continent's food regulatory governance. In December 2025, AFRAF reconvenes, once again in Cairo, on the margins of Food Africa 2025. This second in-person meeting marks a new chapter for food regulatory cooperation across the African continent. Organized by the National Food Safety Authority of Egypt, NFSA, in partnership with the Global Food Regulatory Science Society, G-Force. Over the next 2 days, African food regulators, regional bodies, global partners, and scientific institutions will come together to chart the future of food safety cooperation and innovation in Africa. Day 1 begins with a review of AFRAF's progress since the Cairo Declaration and a focus on enhancing mechanisms of food regulatory cooperation amongst African food regulators. The agenda advances into a critical theme: food monitoring as the foundation of strong food control systems, supporting evidence-based policy aiming for harmonized maximum residue limits and enhanced market access across the continent. On Day 2, the spotlight shifts to regulatory modernization and innovation, exploring how Africa can enable new technologies, strengthen resilience, and revitalize traditional agriculture through science-based and future-ready regulatory frameworks. AFRAF members will also discuss practical pathways to build robust national food safety authorities, mobilize resources, and reinforce partnerships with other regions and global partners. This meeting will lead to a roadmap of food regulatory cooperation amongst African food regulators for 2026 to 2027, empowered through AFRAF's leadership. Together, we are shaping a safer, stronger, and more innovative African food system for today and for generations to come.
Well, ممكن نقعد. Good morning, everybody. This is the second day of our forum. I hope yesterday is going well. I believe it's going well. Unfortunately, this is today I should have one presentation, but I don't feel well, so I hand it over to Professor Sam to get this responsibility. Just I finished a meeting with the Liberian team. It is a very nice and a promising cooperation with them. I hope by end of this day you have some result and some recommendation, and then we are planning and we are going to meet you in the mid of June 2026, inshallah.
So all the best for you. صباح الخير عليكم جميعا. سعيد ان انتوا يعني موجودين. النهارده اليوم الثاني. اليوم الاولاني كان يعني حقيقي في مجموعه من الاطروحات كانت يعني جديده علينا. النهارده في برزنتيشن يعني بروميسنج ومفيد مع دكتور سام، بروفيسور سام، بنتكلم فيه عن الابتكار. والابتكار هنا مش الابتكار بالافكار الجديده بس، ولكن ابتكار في الافكار الجديده، ابتكار في المنتجات الجديده، الابتكار في الانجريدينتس الجديده. ويمكن انتوا شفتوا على مدار الكام سنه اللي فاتت في افكار جديده بتطلع. سببها حاجات كتيره، منها التغيرات المناخيه، عدد السكان اللي بيتزايد، فالناس ابتدت تفكر انها يبقى عندها حلول مبتكره وجديده. النهارده في البرزنتيشن هتشوفوا ازاي احنا بنفكر ان في المستقبل ناخد خطوة لقدام كنفسة، ان يبقى عندنا ريجوليشنز وتشريعات تتوائم مع التغيرات ده. اللي ما ينفعش يبقى عندك منتج جديد بيطلع وانت لسه بتدور على انك انت هتعمل كنترول عليه ازاي. I just give my colleagues a summary about the presentation which is handed over by Dr. Sam. أتمنى إن إحنا يعني النهاردة يكون يوم موفق لنا جميعا، سعيد بكم جميعا. إحنا عندنا إمتى؟ لأن عندنا زمايلنا بنكرمهم على الست شهور اللي فاتت، فعايزين يبقى عندنا وقت. قول لي إمتى عشان نبتدي. يومكم سعيد جميعا.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Good morning to you all. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. It's a great pleasure to have the second day of the African Food Regulatory Forum. This day, the first part of the day, as was discussed in the agenda, is dedicated to innovation, food innovation, and how regulatory modernization can actually be an enabler to food innovation. We have three presentations that are planned. The first presentation was actually to be given by Dr. Tarek El-Houbi, the chairman of the National Food Safety Authority of Egypt. With your permission, I will be giving this presentation as Dr. Tarek indicated. Then I will be making a few remarks about the way food innovation is being managed internationally, and we will take stock of an experience that is taking place in Asia, and particularly in Thailand. We have a recorded presentation from one of my colleagues in Thailand who will be sharing with you how they are handling innovation and how, as African food authorities, we can take stock from that, potentially get inspired as to what AFRAF can do for innovation. Now, without innovation, I don't believe we would be here. We wouldn't have electricity, we wouldn't have airplanes, we wouldn't have Wi-Fi, internet, anything. So just to get inspired to deal with innovation as food regulators, we're going to start with a very short video.
Sometimes they sneak in badly. The middle of the morning test. Sometimes I show up like around late. Sleep. For daily, that's not what you were meant to then clicks. Gravity, let's go. Take shape. The world will never be the same. Great ideas started the same way. So it's really impossible to ignore spot that someone just like you.
And speaking of innovation, that video was generated by artificial intelligence, supported and guided by my colleague, Dr. Eli Bouyazbek. I believe you have recognized actually that a number of the innovations that were featured were pivotal inventions of the last century. Orville Wright took a first flight for a few seconds on the 17th of December, 1913. We had Edison and the invention of electricity and its generalization. And you probably recognize the brothers Lumière, without whom we wouldn't have cinema and the movies. So again, it's the same for food. We wouldn't have been able to eat the food that we eat today without the inventions and the innovations that we've been having. And it is very important that food regulatory frameworks account for innovation in the way they are designed. What we will start with today is a perspective that is given by the National Food Safety Authority of Egypt, NEFSA, and a proposed national food innovation regulatory strategy. Basically, this is a path forward for regulatory transformation, aiming to position the country, Egypt, as a regional hub for innovation, for research, manufacturing, and market access. And again, this presentation is Dr. Tariq's presentation, and I will attempt to deliver it in the best way possible. First, let us position Egypt and food innovation, and actually this proposal in the context of the food regulatory modernization of the country. Egypt has been, over the centuries, a key market in Africa, both in production, in import and export of food and agri-food products. With the creation of the National Food Safety Authority of Egypt, the country has entered an era of food regulatory modernization since 2017, with the gathering of all the food regulatory responsibilities within NEFSA. And considering the shift in global markets, where consumers are looking for healthier diets, where producers are looking for products that allow them higher value, so essentially looking at functionalities, and where we are seeing technologies being developed both for the development of processes and food products, but also to identify the benefits of food, it's very important that a food regulatory framework is aware of the innovations that are happening, and that this framework becomes an enabler and not a disabler for food innovation. Considering also the scientific capacity and competencies that exist in the country and the vibrant food production sector, Egypt has the potential to act as a regional hub for functional ingredients, for novel food, and for advanced production systems. And as the primary food regulatory authority in the country, NEFSA is therefore proposing a food innovation regulatory transformation strategy that would accompany these changes. Of course, the primary objective will still remain the protection of public health, but at the same time, the idea is to make the Egyptian market a market of choice for those who want to innovate and who want to offer faster access to market for these safe ingredients. I will continue, and hopefully the technical glitch in the room will be addressed. Now, of course, in order to do that, you need a vision and a direction. And the vision that is proclaimed through this proposed strategy is that Egypt becomes a leading center of food innovation, powered by a predictable, transparent, science-based regulatory framework that ensures safe and timely access to market for these innovative products. Now, these innovative products are being represented as novel foods, functional ingredients, and also the substantiation of claims that are associated with these ingredients. Given that I lost now the feed here, I will need to have additional support too. So give me. It's not featuring on the screen, but apparently it got restored on Zoom, but not on the screen. So hopefully it will come back. Now, of course, from a vision, we need to set a number of strategic objectives. The first objective has to be related to regulation. And the idea is to look at the current regulatory framework that NEFSA has and to modernize regulation with clear pathways for novel foods and novel ingredients. The second objective is to be more nationally centric and to observe the various food products from Egypt that are produced here, the biodiversity, the scientific innovation, and to focus on some local crops that have the potential to create addition of value, and as a result, that could be considered to become novel foods. The third strategic objective is to look at how we can enable investment and growth through bringing together research, manufacturing, and capacity for market development. The fourth objective is, of course, to have, when we consider access to market to these innovative products and processes, to make sure that public health is always protected. And this is, of course, relying on science as the primary element for safety assessment and for evaluations, but also for the substantiation of claims. And finally, the final strategic objective is to have a leadership role at the regional level and harnessing the dual position of Egypt being an African country, but also an Arab country, being able to contribute and to collaborate by the creation of a center of excellence, but also a platform of information sharing within the two regions that can also inform activities of standard setting internationally. Now, of course, with this, Egypt needs to move with this proposed strategy. And this is essentially what the strategy will help do. From a national policy on food innovation, we are hoping to, with the collaboration of stakeholders, to define things. Because when you speak about innovation, you need to define what is novel, what is a novel ingredient. What is novel for you may not be novel for somebody else. We need also to make sure that the value of innovation is well understood by the entire stakeholder community and becomes really a value in food regulation. We need to make sure also that the oversight, the regulatory oversight, remains transparent and that decisions are maintained on the basis of risks, meaning that decisions will be proportionate to the level of risks for the products that are introduced. But there will be an agreement that novel foods will be subject to pre-market oversight. What does this mean? It means that they're not like regular foods. They need to be reviewed by NEFSA before coming into the market. So the pre-market oversight will be a principle that will be maintained. In that, in fact, Egypt will be in line with most of the international jurisdictions that developed a novel food framework. And finally, what NEFSA will be looking at doing is the development of processes that will enable predictability for innovators and investors to develop products and to make them accessible to the Egyptian market, potentially as a stepping stone to other markets in Africa and in the Arab region. So, of course, in the way these products will be assessed and evaluated for their access to market, we need to have guidelines, and the guidelines will be based on the risk analysis framework, so essentially based on science and the guidance of Codex. Now, one of the elements that regulators face when they develop regulatory frameworks for novelty is how do they define novel foods, as I mentioned, but also how do they categorize them? Basically, the idea is, do you treat a product that is coming from traditional agriculture, but that wasn't being consumed with the same history and is being consumed higher with the same level of scrutiny as a completely innovative ingredient that was extracted from something that was not edible before? The answer is probably not. The second one would have a higher risk than the first one. And that's why doing a categorization of ingredients or of innovations will help to have a risk-based oversight. Of course, creating these categorization will also contribute to predictability, and innovators will know in which category of products they fit, therefore they can expect what type of scrutiny they will be subjected to. Now, NAFSA, as part of its proposed policy, will be coming up with 5 initial categorizations. But, of course, these are initial categorizations in the sense that they will be subject to stakeholder engagement, and there will be potential changes on the basis of recommendations that can be made primarily by the sector that develops these products. So the first category will be coming from traditional foods, but that are now put in new forms. So for example, I'm going to give you an example. You take fish, you extract the fat, you concentrate the fat, and you obtain a functional ingredient out of that. The ingredient is actually coming from a natural source, from a traditional source, but that was concentrated. So that's a traditional food in a new form as a result of processing. This can be the same for example, concentrated botanicals or any type of traditional food that has been reformulated. That's the first category. A second category can be a complete novel ingredient, but from the biodiversity of Egypt. So for example, there is, again, a botanical that was not consumed, but that was used as a herb in a tea. But now you want to make it as part of a salad. And that can be basically a traditional ingredient from biodiversity that is now being introduced in a diet in a different fashion. A third category would be products with limited history of safe use. And now this can be coming from other parts of the world. So for example, again, if I take, the example of insects, they have been consumed in other parts of the world, but they're not consumed in Egypt or in Northern Africa. So potentially there you have a difference of history of use, and you may be considering that another category. A fourth category is related to methods of production. So you have novel production or processing systems. The example that I will use is high pressure processing, although high pressure processing now is no longer novel because it has been really applied for many years. But let's say there is an invention of another non-thermal application that helps cold pasteurization. And we want to promote these type of applications. So that would be a novel process, a new technology that includes also the technologies to produce food. So for example, precision fermentation, whether be it, by the way, for plant proteins or non-plant sources. And finally, the last category, the ingredient may not be novel, but the claim associated with the ingredient may be novel. So essentially, in this particular case, it's really the substantiation of what you can tell about the ingredient. And again, these are proposals, and they will be subject to full stakeholder consultation. Of course, in order to be able to implement the strategy, we need to have a science-based evaluation and claim substantiation. And in that, the National Food Safety Authority of Egypt will apply international standards. When it comes to novel food, you generally look at a number of requirements that look at the composition, the purity, that examines the dietary estimation, the dietary intake, that looks at the toxicological impacts, that may look at the allergenicity, and that also takes into account any clinical information, particularly when it comes to claims. And the idea is to use a weight of evidence approach that will ensure consumer protection and, of course, maintain market integrity. If you do not apply a robust scientific process, stakeholders will not trust your process, and therefore you lose the credibility. So it's very important that the process is robust while being risk-based. Now, one of the ideas to make sure that NEFSA surrounds itself with all the expertise that is required is to bring together collaborations from academia, from industry, on top of the resources that are available within the authority itself, and the idea to create a national center of excellence for food innovation that will be providing the scientific expertise, the scientific advice in this particular field, and that could act as a scientific engine for innovation oversight. Now, how would we operationalize that? NEFSA will be proposing a phased approach to roll out this policy and the associated regulatory transformation over a period of 36 months. By the way, this proposal of the regulatory transformation is part of the end of the strategy that NEFSA set to itself for the period of 2023-2026. And as a result, in fact, this is a transition from the strategy that NEFSA has implemented so far to a potential new strategy where innovation can be at the core of it. The idea is to make sure that the plan encompasses the development of the policies and the foundations, that there are the tools and the capacities, but also to develop pilots that will allow to check how this can be operationalized. This will be scaled at the national level, but there is a potential for collaboration at the regional level, and that's why this presentation is being made at an African level. And of course, if you develop any strategy of this nature, we need to make sure that you have the right governance and the right capacity building that supports the process. Now, I'm not going to go through the phases of the strategy one by one, but the idea, one of the elements, I'm going to go through the, I'm trying to move. Okay, that's what I wanted to, I know, I'm looking at, so basically, one of the elements that we hope will facilitate this strategy is also that NEFSA could contribute to the creation of an information sharing platform on food innovation, where there is the possibility to gather the various scientific assessments that have been conducted by other regulators, starting, of course, from OECD countries, but also beyond. So essentially looking at other experiences, like, for example, in Asian countries, whether they are from the OECD or non-OECD countries. The idea is, of course, to monitor the decisions that are made by other regulators, but also to allow access to the outputs of the scientific assessments and the regulatory decisions in other countries, to Egyptian stakeholders, but also to other regional partners. And of course, there is the intent to support Egyptian companies, not only to access the market here in Egypt, but also to access international markets. And hopefully this will create a gateway to global regulatory intelligence and will reinforce the regional leadership. Now, I will summarize once again the why a strategy such as this one is really important. And you've seen it in the first video about the importance of innovation overall. Innovation is an engine of economic and industrial development. It is innovation that tends to attract foreign direct investment. Again, when you have a predictable pathway of access to market of innovative products and ingredients, you will have secured a better attraction of foreign investments. Of course, it will help grow the value of products that are produced in Egypt, whether it be to the farmer or to the processor. We also have a contribution to the research and development ecosystem in the country by creating clear expectations for the outputs of these research and innovations. This also will help boost exports if products are done in Egypt and are approved in accordance to predictable and robust systems. This will help their acceptance in other markets and therefore will boost exports. And it will empower small and medium enterprises and startups and contribute to the regional leadership. Finally, this will align with Egypt's contribution to various regional forums, whether be it the African Continental Free Trade Area, whether its contribution to the standardization efforts at the Arab level, but also a contribution to the international food standard setting within the Codex Alimentarius Commission. And as a conclusion to what was presented, the path to food innovation and to food innovation leadership can come through the development of this strategy and its deployment. Of course, keeping that vision as a guide, aiming not only to protect public health and to enable the protection of consumers, but also to boost the food and agri-food development and to ensure the value addition of the production sector here in Egypt and at the African level. So I hope I did justice to the presentation that Dr. Tariq intended to do and to share with you. It is a proposal at this stage, and NEFSA, of course, will be consulting and exchanging on this proposal of policy and strategic development. And thank you for your attention. Dr. Tariq, if you have any additions on what was presented, please.
زي ما شفتم يمكن انا هلخص اللي قاله الدكتور سام في البرزنتيشن بالعربي. الابتكار دلوقتي مش مجرد ان احنا بنطلع منتج جديد، ولكن هو في شوية حاجات لازم تتوفر في اللي هيخش السوق. واحدة منها شفافية الإطلاق أو اللونش، إن لازم المصنع أو المبتكر يقول المنتج ده الغرض منه إيه، وده بيتوقف على المنتج إيه، مكوناته إيه، وجاية منين. ويمكن في جزء من البرزنتيشن كانت الرؤية إن مصر تصبح هب للابتكار الغذائي، لأن عندها حاجات تأهلها إن هو يبقى عندها الوضعية دي، عندها يعني حصيلة أو محفظة من المحاصيل والمنتجات قادرة إن هي تستخدمها. يمكن في آخر جزء في آخر سلايدز كان الحلبة والكركديه والنعناع. صحيح دي منتجات بتتصدر، ولكن إنك أنت تعمل لها القيمة المضافة وتغيرها من محصول إلى منتج وظيفي أو صحي، ده بيرفع من الفاليو بتاعها وبيساعد على إنك أنت تزود من صادراتك. الحاجة التانية إن أغلب المحاصيل دي بيشتغلوا فيها الشركات المتوسطة والصغيرة ومتناهية الصغر، ودول اللي احنا عايزين حسب استراتيجيتنا في الهيئة 23-26 إن احنا ندعم القطاع الشركات الناشئة المتوسطة والصغيرة وخصوصا المتناهية الصغر اللي هي بتشتغل في النوع ده من الاكتيفيتيز أو الأنشطة اللي هي المحاصيل خصوصا الحقلية. التقسيمة اللي كان قالها بروفيسور سام على المكونات أو على المستويات دي متغيرة ومش يعني ده يعني الديناميكية مش استاتيك، مش ثابتة، لا بتتغير على حسب احتياج السوق وعلى حسب تغير اتجاهات الأسواق وتغير أنماط الاستهلاك للمستهلكين. لو حضراتكم اخدتوا بالكم احنا في خلال ال10 سنين الأخير يمكن ما كانش حد يتصور ان احنا يبقى عندنا حجم الاستهلاك ده من الشوفان. شوفان ما كانش في الثقافة المصرية ان احنا نستخدمه، كان بيروح في اتجاهات تانية. ولكن مع تطور الابحاث وان اصبح ليه قيمة مضافة في استخدامه كمنتج صحي، تغير اتجاهاته، اصبح يعني نقدر نقول عليه منتج استراتيجي ممكن الناس تشتغل عليه ان هو يبقى ليه انوفيشن وليه مردود في التصدير. انا بس مش هطول عليكم. انا اللي انا شايفه ان احنا عندنا يعني تحدي كبير في ان احنا يبقى عندنا الحجم ده من الابتكارات، ولكن لازم يكون بيقابله في الناحية التانية نفس النمو في التشريعات ونفس النمو في المحددات لدخول السوق. عندنا دلوقتي في اتجاه كبير من 3 4 10 سنين يمكن ان الناس بقى عندها اهتمام تعرف الحساسية ومسبباتها، فينفعش انك انت تحط منتج جديد او مبتكر من غير ما بتكون حاطط ده. بعض مستويات الاستخدام لما بتعلى بتؤدي للسمية، فلازم ده يكون برضو محطوط في الاعتبار. شفافية الإطلاق وشفافية الليبل أو الفرونت ليبل والكونتاكتس الموجودة مع الادعاء والكليم. ما ينفعش إنك أنت تقول ده مركب عفوا منتج صحي أو منتج وظيفي من غير ما يكون في أساس علمي أنت بتستند إليه. انا مش هطول عليكم. اتمنى ان يعني يكون العرض اللي احنا عملناه ده يعني وصل للي احنا عايزين وبنستهدفه ان هو يوصل لكم. ان السنين اللي جايه سنين فيها تحدي كبير، مش بعدد منتجاتك ولكن بالمنتجات اللي هي بتعمل لك زي ما بيقولوا في الاقتصاد الريفينيو او بتعمل لك الربحيه، وفي نفس الوقت لازم تحقق المأمونيه. احنا دورنا كهيئه خدمية وهيئة رقابية ان احنا نضمن ان المنتج المتداول ده يكون آمن، ولكن ده بيكون حافز للمستثمرين والشركات المتعددة الجنسيات انها تيجي تلاقي بيئة خصبة بالتشريعات، تلاقي بيئة خصبة من العلماء والمبتكرين ان هم يشتغلوا في المجال ده. بس حبيت ألخص ده بسرعة، في حاجات كتير طبعا اتقالت في البرزنتيشن، ولو حضراتكم عندكم أسئلة فاتفضلوا. If you have any question please.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Tariq. And again, we hope a full success to this visionary approach that NEFSA is developing for food innovation. We're going to use the time, given that we are facing some technical difficulties in the room, but also because Dr. Tariq has elected to also appreciate a number of colleagues from the National Food Safety Authority in front of peers from African food regulatory authorities. So Dr. Tariq will actually be handling a ceremony of appreciation of NEFSA members. Maybe Dr. Tariq, I'll give you the opportunity to introduce the context of this appreciation.
This is part from our appreciation system in our research, is that is to select from time to time. Actually, this year we select in two parts. Every 6 months we select some unique members for our team. We have a remaining is also it's a unique, but we cannot select 1,800 people to appreciation. So يعني انا يعني جميعا بشكركم. والناس اللي احنا بنختارهم زي ما كنت قلت قبل كده احنا بنختارهم يعني بنكافئهم على مجهودهم، ولكن في ناس كتير قوي يعني الوقت ولا المكان يسع ان احنا نستقبلهم، ولكن لو ربنا احيانا وكان لنا عمر السنين الجايه او الايام اللي جايه نكافئهم. ومن هنا انا بشكر كل زمايلي اللي موجودين في الهيئه القوميه لسلامه الغذاء من اول اسكندريه بحكم انها سكندري لغايه حلايب وشلاتين. ممكن نبتدي بتكريم حضراتكم. عنك. دكتورة مي فتحي. دكتورة مي كانت موجودة في أو ما زالت يعني موجودة في فرع سوهاج، صح ولا اتنقلتي ولا؟ دكتورة مي كانت وما زالت في فرع سوهاج، وإحنا اخترناها من حوالي سنة إن هي تروح تخش برنامج. كانت السفارة النيوزيلندية طلبت إن احنا نرشح حد من عندنا، وعلى مدار كذا شهر كانت خاضت مجموعة من الاختبارات اونلاين علشان يسلكتوا من الناس اللي هم دخلوا في البرنامج ده مجموعة من كذا دولة. واحد من مصر كانت الدكتورة مي، يروحوا يقعدوا حوالي اسبوع في نيوزيلندا يشوفوا الدوميستيك ماركت ويشوفوا الريسك اسسمنت بيتطبق ازاي بشكل ما. فهي ادت وقابلت بلاء حسنا، فعشان كده احنا بنشكرها النهارده. شكرا دكتور. دكتورة جادة خديوي، مقدمة الحفلة الإعلامية الكبيرة. دكتورة جادة واحدة من الدفعة الثالثة من البرنامج الرئاسي، والحقيقة إن هي بدأت مشوارها العلمي عندنا في إدارة المعالم، وحاليا هي واحدة من أعمدة المكتب الفني. فهي بالأمانة والحق والاستحقاق والتقديم أداء يعني على مستوى. فأنا بشكرها بنيابة عن الأرض والمؤتمر على نفسي. أستاذة هدير. هدير بتشتغل معانا في إدارة الصدر، ولكن إحنا بنكرمها ونشكرها لأنها في الفترة اللي فاتت على مدار الكام سنة اللي فاتت بتشارك في الجزء بتاعنا في أفريقيا. ولكن السنة دي يعني كانت أكثر يعني ونشاط نتيجة إن إحنا تحملنا الجزء من أول ما تعاقدنا مع الشركة اللي هو التكنيك الديزاين. فهم كل زمايلي أنا بكرمهم لأدائهم في الجزء اللي حضراتكم لو زرتوه أو لسه ما زرتوش. فعندنا النهارده دكتور ظهور، والجزء الغرض منه إنه بيقدم فكرة للمصنع اللي ما يعرفش الهيئة، وبيعرف المصنعين اللي يعرفوا الهيئة بالتشريعات الجديدة والإجراءات الجديدة والقرارات الجديدة عشان نساعده ان هو يتوائم مع اللي مطلوب منه. فانا بشكر الاستاذه هديه. هو مش ابني، هو ابني بس عشان اسمك مش يعني. محمد طارق بيشتغل في إدارة الواردات، ولكن هو بيتمتع بحاجة حقيقي جيدة جدا، إن هو بيشتغل إحصائيا بشكل كويس جدا. فجزء كبير من الداتا اللي بتنزل في تقريرنا، وجزء كبير من الداتا اللي احنا بنشيرها مع قطاع صناعة الغذاء الزراعية جاي من عند محمد طارق. فأنا بشكره حقيقي لمجهوده، بالإضافة إلى إن هو
عمل مجهود كبير قوي في جناح الهيئة الصينية. فشكرا.
Okay, so gonna get the clicker. Again, congratulations to all colleagues from NEFSA and congratulations for your great work and wishing you really continued success serving NEFSA and the Egyptian people. Okay, so with that, we will continue with our discussion on food innovation. And in fact, at this point, what I attempt to do, whether we have the collaboration of the technical part or we don't, we adapt. As food regulators, that's our job, is to continually adapt. So we will learn to do that. Apparently on Zoom, things actually work, apparently. So hopefully, you will be able to get, in any case, the presentations on the website of AFRAF. My presentation is really aimed to build on the proposal that was made by NEFSA and get to you a discussion about the variety of regulatory frameworks associated with novel foods around the world, and potentially pave the way to a possible discussion that African regulators could have about how do you want, as regulators, to tackle innovation. Do you wish to have a novel food regulation? Based on what I screened, and basically you correct me if I'm wrong, the African Standardization Organization does not have, at this point, a standard for novel foods. There is no technical committee that is dedicated to novel foods. However, I believe that the general requirements for novel foods, particularly based on the proposal made in the European Union, these general requirements seem to have been discussed within ARSO and consensus has been achieved around them. However, I'm not sure, and this will be subject to a discussion, how every regulator in the continent is dealing with novel foods. Do you have a novel food regulation? How do you deal with a novel ingredient? How do you deal with claims, and particularly with claims that are not governed by Codex, meaning the non-nutrient claims? Okay, and this is where we would like to see where AFRAF can have a contribution. I'm going to ask actually for the presentation to be put through at least on Zoom so that I can follow the presentation on Zoom, or when? Okay. It's not there yet. Yeah. So, okay. Otherwise, I will follow. Basically, I will attempt to have this part of the presentation also mixed with the discussion that we wanted to have at the end of this session. So mixing both aspects. First of all, when we speak about innovation and novel foods, generally, this is coming from our attempt to have a diversification of food sources and also an attempt to have access to higher quality nutrients. Generally also, novel foods and novel ingredients tend to be produced in a different way. We are aiming to promote sustainability. And novelty is also coming from the fact that consumers are aspiring to new ingredients and new products. I'm going to give you an example, at least one that I have lived through in Canada. When you have an environment where people are suffering from chronic diseases, and actually suffering particularly from some of the contributors to chronic diseases. So for example, high cholesterol levels. So you may control high cholesterol levels either with pills, and that's what statins do, but you can also do it through the diet, not only through observing a diet that has low levels of cholesterol, but also potentially having incorporation in your diet some ingredients that can contribute to even lowering cholesterol levels. The examples, sterols, phytosterols, can be contributors to lowering blood cholesterol. And basically, phytosterols are plant extracts. You generally don't eat them in your diet, but you can have the plant extract with the functionality, and then you can incorporate that in mayonnaise, in yogurt, in various food products. And if you have the right amount, meaning, because of course, you cannot have sprinkles and make the claim that it lowers the cholesterol. It has to have the amount that within the dietary consumption will induce the effect. So if you have that, you can have a claim about contributes to lowering blood cholesterol. So this is an example of a change in the food composition with the introduction of an ingredient. It is coming from biodiversity. It's not, an invention. It's an extract, but it is not generally consumed in the way that will induce the claim. So you are putting it in a different food formulation and you may associate a claim to it. And this is coming from a driver that people are looking to incorporate in their diet, something that will help them reduce their cholesterol. So this is a driver for innovation. And you will end up having various examples of novel foods and novel processes, ingredients, novel production systems, novel processes, but also we can discover new attributes to ingredients, so new functionalities to ingredients. Now, my question to you is, how would you, as regulators, address that? So I would like to have a discussion about this. I'm going to take a microphone if possible.
Test.
Yeah, it's working. Thank you. So our colleague from Mauritius will tell us about how this is potentially being regulated.
Okay, good morning. So we have introduced in our new legislation, which came into force since last year, the element of innovation. We have defined what is novel food. Novel food, and we have also introduced a condition for novel food, in the sense that all novel food will need to have a pre-market approval permit delivered by the government of Mauritius, that is the Ministry of Health and Wellness, in order that this food can be put on the market. And also we have several regulations regarding claims. So if ever there is a claim on a food, that need to be justified. It has to be proved so that it can be put on the market as a novel food. So these are, I believe, they are only preliminary. These are the first steps. We need to build up on that in order to further improve the law, but this will come with time as we start to get those novel food coming into Mauritius.
If I may ask, actually, Yusuf, on your point, what are the triggers of novelty in the Mauritius system? So, what makes a food novel? Because that's always the question, you know. What are there specific characteristics that make the food novel?
I think during the presentation, you touched on a very interesting point. You know, we at the Ministry of Health, we are spending a lot of money on cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and now cancer is also rising. So I think food having these capacity to prevent or even to cure to some extent these diseases will be more welcome as novel food. But you said something which made me smile when you said that. You said that some food we can use them as ingredient, and you give the example of mayonnaise or knowing the industry how it functions. But okay, you know, the problem is when you try to put these ingredients, which are very good, they are very good for the health. When you put these ingredients in those processed food, there are also other ingredients which might be damaging for human health if consumed too much. And I'll give you one example. If you put, for example, these polyphenols in a soft drink which contains a lot of sugar, you know, the perception from the public is that he's focusing on the polyphenols, which is good, but he's also taking the sugar, which is not good for the health. So we have to be very careful when we try to mix those ingredients, those novel food, which is very beneficial for the health, together with the processed food. This might give rise to other problems which might be out of control in the
because if you like these are debatable in terms of public policy direction that go beyond regulatory policy. Where we are discussing right now, we are really more at the regulatory policy that tends to be, of course, driven by other considerations, but mainly scientific consideration. From a health standpoint, so far, what was assessed and the conditions of production gives the same level of safety of the counterpart. Not everything is completely solved, and there is actually more guidance. And in fact, at the upcoming Codex committee that is happening next week in the United States, CCFH, the Food Hygiene Committee, so this is really work in progress in the regulatory field, and I think it's very important that we follow these discussions. If you allow me actually to give maybe more, I would like to hear maybe from Ghana, from Capo Verde, and from Mauritania. How do you handle novel foods if you have a regulation for novel foods?
Thank you very much. For now, in Ghana, we don't have any regulation for novel foods, but once the manufacturer indicates on the label those claims, medical claims, health benefits, it has to be substantiated. Those claims might be substantiated, and once that is done, there's no problem. But with regards to regulation, there's none, and also we don't have any standards for such novel products. The only thing that must be followed is the substantiation of the claim. That's all. Once that is done, there's no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia, you can speak French. Yes, you can speak French. Oh, no? Okay. Okay. Okay, so then I don't know, in Liberia, would you like to comment? In Algeria, Libya? You have a regulation? No, you don't have a regulation on novel foods. You do have one? Okay, so in Liberia, just to mention, Liberia doesn't have right now a regulation on novel foods. In Libya,
thank you. In Libya as well, we don't have a regulation for novel food itself, but we do follow a process, as my colleague from Ghana said. If there's no novel food produced in Libya, but when it comes from outsourced, imported from out of Libya, there is a like procedure to follow. That we look at international standard, we look at the standard from the country of this source, and we follow this procedure. Just one comment, I find it really good example of the novel. You give us some example of novel foods, and we have one in the room here, which is considered novel in Libya, and I don't know if it's novel or not, which is here. It is toasted wheat germ, janine al-qamah, which was found in the healthy table there, which is absolutely brilliant. I think it's a brilliant idea because this product in Libya it's just throw it away, and here to have it like in such a way, it's like novel.
So I think actually this is a very good example of a discussion on. This is basically a food product that is made of known ingredients or things that are known, but that are formulated in a different way. Now, the question is, should this be novel or not? And when I say, by the way, should it be novel, it is probably novel in the English definition. It is a novel because, everybody who does a new recipe, it's a novel recipe. If I invent a new recipe, I invent a new cake, for example, I'm a genius. I don't know, I invent a new paella or full mudammas, new way of full mudammas. I don't know, and I actually make it even better than the one that Egyptians love here, for some reason. Well, that's a new recipe. It may be great, but it's not necessarily novel, or it may or may not be based on the regulatory definition. So I think the question is, how do we build regulatory definitions for novel foods? And in other words, I'm gonna even ask you this. If I am a regulator and I have industry that is knocking on my door every day and asking me I want to get products on the market and I want to have predictability, how do I start by the development of a novel food regulation? What type of guidance do I follow? Do I follow Europe? Do I follow the United States, which, by the way, doesn't have a novel food basically regulation under the US FDA? Under the USDA, there are things that cover novelty, but under the US FDA scheme, there is no novel food regulations in the United States. Europe has one, Canada has one, Australia and New Zealand have one, a number of Asian jurisdictions have one. So the question is, if I am a regulator in Africa and I want to start, where do I start? How can I get a guidance on that? Should I consider the process? Should I consider the outcome? Should I consider the history of safe use? Should I put the history of safe use with a date, like in Europe, and with no date in other jurisdictions, etc.? So my question to you, is this an area where, because it is, a brainstorming and requires potentially some collaboration, putting some brains together, putting also some history, some traditions, because food are not like any other product. We don't regulate food as we regulate pencils. We are attached to food. Food has also a cultural dimension to them. When we speak about a history of safe use, it's a cultural history. There are some societies in various parts of even the continent, or actually the world, who have been accustomed to consuming several food products. For example, I'm going to take tempeh, which is a tofu-based, product. Well, it has been consumed in Indonesia for centuries. We haven't been consuming it as much in North Africa, for example. I don't know if it is consumed in Western Africa, in Eastern Africa, and so on. So the question is, how do we start? And would you consider that this is an area, as AFRAF, to complement the work, to basically create maybe a group of individuals, a group of experts that could deliberate and develop some kind of guidance on how a regulation on novel food should be made? Because right now, there is no such guidance in Codex. When there is something in Codex, we're good. But when there is no such guidance in Codex, and we are looking at experiences, it would be nice to bring our experiences together. The other area is claims for non-nutrient ingredients. So essentially, I'm going to use the phytosterol example. Okay? The phytosterol example, that's not a nutrient, like that's not a micronutrient, or it's not calcium, it's not sodium, it's not vitamin D. For those, we have guidance on from Codex. But for the others, we have general requirements coming from CCFL, which is essentially not to have the product, not to have the claim, deceiving, to be truthful to the information, to be substantiated, but we don't have more. So the question is, would you think that this is an area where we can consider it a priority as part of managing the innovation in such a way that African food regulatory authorities are actually not always catching up, but rather are at the forefront of a system in this case? And would you consider this to be one of the priorities that AFRAF could identify for work in the upcoming period? Dr. Ba.
I think this is a very interesting topic and very pertinent for that matter to regulators in the African region. I might broaden my comments to also some of the presentation of Dr. Tariq looking at innovations. It's a must. But technology can also be a nightmare. I think this is one example. Our field screens. I'll give you an enlightenment. I'll give you an example of what technology can also do. I was in Pakistan 2 weeks ago when the International Food Ag Expo. And at the opening ceremony, we are all seated, and the minister came to open it. And after reciting the Quran, and then he was called on the podium to start the process, everything went away, everything. So that was the end of the opening ceremony. So I felt sorry for someone. I know someone would lose their job somewhere, but that's how technology can also be an enemy to us as we speak. However, we must depend on it. We must use it for us to be proactive rather than to be responsive. And I feel that as regulators, I think the best option is to be proactive, like you say, rather than to be responsive, because then things will just be put on us and we'll just be trying to respond to their needs. Now, one of the capacities to be doing this. So we must rely on other countries or regions that have got more robust technologies. Egypt has portrayed themselves, because I have read all the documentations from AFRAF, and they are positioning themselves as leaders in innovation, in technology, in not only in Africa but also in the other region, in the Near East region. Now, I think that role has to be further looked into. How can Egypt and other members actually, through can be able to something like, most often we are leaving biopreservation behind, and I think if we invest a lot in biopreservation of our agricultural products in particular, we are going to minimize chemical contaminants in food, saving the continent a lot of illnesses, foodborne illnesses, but more so, we will increase amazingly market access. But at the same time, we will contribute to general food safety. And no, not food safety again, food security. Yeah. So the abundance and availability of food. If we do that, we will contribute. We'll contribute this. So, and of course, how we are going to synchronize or harmonize our data must be very, very important aspect that we can think about, because without it, we cannot have appropriate regulations for these novel or innovative ways of food. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ba. And I think I will take really a key point that you made there in relation with having the regulators contribute to the preservation of the biodiversity in the African continent by enabling, to keep the value addition. Because if you do not have value addition for certain crops, for certain products, then essentially these products will not necessarily be propagated. So the idea here is to find a way such that African food regulatory frameworks would support such biodiversity with the availability of possible transformation of these products, extraction of these products. Basically, the farmers that are looking after either these crops, either actually planting them or simply harvesting them, making sure that they get the value out of that. And they would only get the value out of that if the regulatory framework allows their access to market. I'm going to give you an example. In Canada, camelina oil. Who has heard about camelina oil? Okay. This is basically a herb that that grows naturally, but it can also be planted, and that has the particularity of having a higher fat content. When you analyze the oil extract from this plant, you find a high proportion of omega-3s and omega-6s. And even though, again, that's not something that used to be consumed, the extract was analyzed. In fact, in the Canadian system, that fits the definition of novel food. And it was assessed, going back to your point, Dr. Bal, risk assessment that was done for all the various aspects, the composition, the purity, the methods of production, the toxicology, the comparability from a nutrition standpoint, looking at the nutrients and the anti-nutrients, the allergenicity, and when the parameters of assessment concluded to the safety of the product as it was to be incorporated in the diet, but again, based on the dietary assessment and the way it would be consumed in Canada, that product was given the authorization to access the market and became now, it was not a plant that used to produce food. Now it became a plant that produces a food ingredient. And that's an example of what a novel food regulation can do. So my question to you is, potentially, would you consider, and this is what we would like to come up with as part of the recommendations of the day, would you consider that a working group of AFRAF could be constituted, of course, after calling on experts, etc., could be constituted in order to provide guidance on how to develop a novel food regulation in Africa? So actually, it reminds me of a work that was done in Codex at CC Africa. I think CC Africa is one of the only, if not the only, coordinating committee that has guidance on how to develop a food law, in Africa, that is really meant to accompany efforts of African regulators as part of their efforts of food regulatory modernization, because there's a lot of new authorities, new laws being envisaged, and this guidance, in fact, is cited a lot as a good reference, not only in Africa, but in other parts of the world. So the idea is, if we have a working group that could look at providing guidance right now in an informal way in the AFRAF setting, but that can potentially be used by regulators and even could be considered for CC Africa later on if it is deemed to be fulfilling the requirements. So I would like to have your reactions. Patricia, I don't know Patricia, je ne sais pas si la traduction fonctionne pour vous. No? Patricia? Can you understand? Yeah, you are following. Okay. Would you mind giving us your perspective on this? I'm putting you on the spot there. Sorry.
Donc, seulement pour dire, merci. Seulement pour dire qu'au Cap-Vert, c'est nouveau pour nous. À 2008, on a fait notre législation de base sur le secteur alimentaire, le food safety. On a mis dans la loi l'aliment pour normal, mais l'aliment nouvel aliment et l'aliment d'ingrédients fonctionnels. Mais jusqu'à un moment, on n'a pas fait la réglementation. Pour nous, c'est de nouveau parler de nouveaux aliments, mais on suivi la modification mondiale qu'arrive cet nouveau aliment pour nous. Parce qu'au Cap-Vert, 80% de produits alimentaires qu'on consomme, c'est importé. Et pour ça, pour nous, c'est un sujet important de peut-être faire la réglementation de cet nouveau produit. Et je pense au niveau d'Afrique, on peut travailler ensemble pour voir quel nouveau produit pour l'Afrique. Merci.
Merci. Thank you, Patricia. So briefly, actually, the intervention of Patricia indicating that in Capo Verde, there was a new law that was adopted in 2008 it's a food safety legislation overall that actually incorporated mention of novel foods and functional foods. However, it did not go beyond that, so there was no application of that. Cabo Verde is a jurisdiction that imports over 80% of its products from outside, so the 80% of foods are imported. And considering really what's happening outside, it's very important to have a regulatory system that accompanies the changes that are happening around the world. Thanks.
Right.
Yes, please.
No, currently, most countries in Africa do not have regulations on this novel food. So coming up with a technical committee to provide the guidelines for it will be a good idea, so that more countries will know how to deal with that. So it will be a good idea. So I think we can consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. And ربما من موريتانيا ومن الجزائر هل هناك أي دلائل تنظيمية أو لوائح التي تنظم الأغذية المستحدثة? So just in Algeria, in Mauritania, so I think Algeria requested the floor right away, and then after that we'll go to Mauritania. Is there any, are there any requirements for novel foods?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. شكرا على السؤال. في الحقيقة ممكن عندي مداخلة من بعد ممكن نفصل أكثر، ولكن حاليا ما كاش نص بصريح العبارة على المواد الغذائية الجديدة، ولكن القوانين الحالية يعني نسميها قوانين أفقية لحماية المستهلك بأمن المنتوج، مطابقة المنتوج قبل العرض في السوق، كلها تطبق على المنتوجات الجديدة. الآن إذا كان منتوج جديد يدعي، تكلمت عليها هيلث كليم، ادعاء صحي، هذا مباشرة السلطات المتعلقة وزارة الصحة إجباراً تمد رأيها في المنتوج. هذا الأمر كثير يخص المكملات الغذائية. وبالرغم هذا راح لكن نزيد نتكلم مفصل أكثر الأخ صموال، لأن إشكالية الابتكار وهذه المستجدات تحديات في سلامة الغذاء صعيبة، خاصة من التحولات الجديدة اللي رانا فيها، الابتكار، البحث، التطوير، الاندستري 4.0. أصبحنا نتكلم من المخبر للمستهلك مش من الحقل للمستهلك. تحديات المشرع صعيب عليه يواكبها، وبالتالي احنا لما نعمل مع المبتكرين أحسن. المشرع احنا في الجزائر وزارة البحث العلمي وحتى شركة اقتصاد المعرفة والشركات الناشئة راهم يعملوا معنا ويشاركونا في كل المجال اللي يقوموا عليه. حتى المشرع في سلامة الغذاء يتابع وش هي المستجدات، لأنه في بعض الأحيان الأخ صموال وضع قانون ممكن يقيد الابتكار، يقيد الإبداع، ولكن مهما كان يجب المستوى الأعلى لحماية المستهلك ما نتنازلش عليه. الباقي ممكن نتناقش عليه باش نعطي الحرية في هذا المجال. وانت طرحت سؤال هل ممكن فوج عامل في نفس السياق، أنا نظن باللي فكرة جيدة. فوج عامل هذا مش أنا كمشرع في التشريع في التنظيم كتقني، ولكن راح يكونوا فيه خبراء مختصين في كل المجالات في كل دولة، راح يعطينا يعني فايدة كبيرة ومبادرة جديدة تقدر تكون في مشروع الأفراف 2026. علاه مثلا لما نتكلم على الأعشاب العطرية والطبية، هذا عندها مسموح مش غير مسموح بعض النباتات من الانقراض تمنع، ماهوش قضيه بالصحه، فيها اجراءات واحده اخرى تمنع هذا الامر. ومليح مثل هذا الاشكال يكون متعدد الاختصاصات ويتناقش بصفه شامله حتى تكون يعني توجهات للدول الافريقيه، لان لازم نواكبوا هذا، والشرع لازم يسمع للابتكار هذا باش ما نحدش فيه. وشكرا.
Thank you very much, Nuruddin. And I'm going to attempt actually to summarize what Nuruddin has mentioned. So in Algeria, there isn't a specific regulation or a legislation foods. However, the horizontal legislation, which is really horizontal to protect consumers overall, covers all products and covers including novel foods and novel ingredients. Basically, Nuruddin made a couple of really key points. One of them is that while we aspire to have any type of regulation or legislation that supports the access to market that will not be a deterring factor to innovation, but at the same time, the primary responsibility and the primary objective should be the protection of consumers. And he also indicated that some of the market, for example, to some herbs and others aspect, but it might be even to an environmental law or to a biodiversity law that aims to really preserve a particular crop or a particular herb versus others. And he supports the idea of the creation of a working group under AFRAF that could be looking at this, with the understanding that this working group will bring a multifaceted review and brings experts from various scientific fields in the various African jurisdictions. Going to our colleague in Mauritania. And actually, I don't know if anybody online is requesting the floor just to monitor that as well. So please.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله الكريم. شكرا دكتور سامويل. ما يتعلق بموريتانيا، كما تعلمون موريتانيا دولة في إفريقيا، وهي دولة نسبيا تعدادها صغير، وفي الحقيقة لديها نقطة اتصال عن طريق الكودكس منذ سنوات. أنشأت مؤخرا في الأخير وكالة موريتانيا للسلامة الصحية، وهذه الأسباب التي جعلتني كمديرها العام أن أنتقل إلى هذه الهيئة. هذا المنتدى هيئة الإفريقية لتشريع الأقضية، نتمنى ما فيه من طموح ونصوص علمية لنكتسب منها معا جميعا. فيما يتعلق بما يسمى اليوم بالابتكار القطاعي، هذا الابتكار في الحقيقة هو حتمي نظرا للصناعات المتعددة والأقضية المتنوعة، سواء كان ابتكار تقليدي أو ابتكار حديث. كل يتدخل الفكر، كل يتدخل العلم من أجل إثبات شيء معين أو تحسين مادة معينة أو إضفاء مادة معينة تجعل القضاء يطول فترته الزمنية أو يتغير تقليده إذا انتهت صلاحيته. كل هذه أشياء مهمة جدا. إذا ما كنا مركزين على المخاطر الصحية ودارسينها، هل ينتقل هذا الشيء إلى المسائل ضارة كيميائيا أو غيره؟ فهذا في الحقيقة شيء مطلوب ويجب نتحدث عنه كثيرا، لأن هذا موضوع يسمى موضوع العصر، لأنه جميل جدا. نحن في موريتانيا نحتاج لهذه النصوص وندعمها كثيرا ونشد الرحال إليها كثيرا. لماذا هذه الأهمية في بلدنا؟ وأنا كمدير محاول أن أطور هذا الشيء في بلدي ينطر من بفارق الصبر. أشكرك جيدا وأشكر
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed, for your intervention. So, leading support to be a potentially forum from which Mauritania and its new agency can garner the expertise and the experience from other countries, indicating, of course, that the area of food innovation is an important one because it is happening globally, and that there is a need for any this meeting that will be tackling food innovation and providing guidance to food regulators. It's not really about food innovation in general. It's really how to regulate novel foods and novel ingredients, including if we want to even have specific categories, because novel foods and novel ingredients, it's a vast field. We might actually even have, so somebody from online, okay. So we have a colleague online, Udu, your microphone is open. If you can introduce yourself and from which country you are, and you can make your intervention if technology helps. So actually, going back to what Dr. Ba is saying, technology is great when it works. And that's why, as regulators, our role, or your role, is to make sure that it works better. You know, you and we can relay your comments to the group. I think with this recommendation, we arrive at the end of this particular session. And by the way, by doing this, we actually made the second section, which is what's happening.
Africa stands at a pivotal moment. A continent rich in agricultural heritage, dynamic markets, and evolving food systems, now united by a shared ambition to ensure safe, resilient, and innovative food for every African citizen. In 2023, African food regulatory authorities came together in Cairo to make history. The Cairo Declaration established the Food Regulatory Authorities Forum, AFRAF, a collaborative network to strengthen the continent's food regulatory on the margins of 2025. This second in-person meeting marks a new chapter for food regulatory cooperation. Food regulators, regional bodies, global partners, and scientific institutions will come together to chart the future of food safety cooperation and innovation in Africa. This meeting will lead to a roadmap of food regulatory cooperation
الوقت 5 دقائق 10
15 دقائق، ما بين 5 و10 دقائق. انا ساخذ ممكن تتوقف في الوسط عشان نعمل ترانسليشن.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. شكرا الأستاذ صمويل على هذه إتاحة الفرصة لنتشارك مع الزملاء والخبراء نظام سلامة الغذاء في الجزائر وأهم المستجدات فيه. لكن قبل ما نتكلم عن المستجدات يعني الجديد خاصة في التنظيم، من الأحسن نتكلم على النظام بصفة مختصرة على أي أساس مبني. نظام سلامة الغذاء في الجزائر على غرار كل الأنظمة المعروفة مبني على 5 قواعد أو 6 قواعد. الأول هو إطار تشريعي وتنظيمي مبني على الأساس العلمي، هذا هو الأساس. الإطار الثاني هو إطار هيكلي، تحديد المهام بين الهيئات المعنية بسلامة الغذاء. المحور الثالث هو لما نتكلم على سلامة الغذاء لازم نتكلم مخابر تقييم المطابقة. الأمر الرابع هو التفتيش، هيئات التفتيش وقمع الغش. وأيضا محور هذا نعمل عليه أيضا هو الاتصال والإعلام. لما نتكلم على الاتصال مش الاتصال في حالة الأزمات ولا الخطر، ولكن الاتصال والإعلام في التحسيس، في الإعلام مع المهنيين وجمعيات حماية المستهلك. الآن لو نروح للقوانين ما نذكرهاش كثير ولكن بعجالة لك سمح الوقت أستاذ صمويل. عندنا قانونين أساسيين بالصحة الحيوانية والصحة النباتية. الصحة الحيوانية القانون 88/08، والصحة النباتية القانون 87/17. هذو القوانين حددوا السياسة الوطنية في الصحة الحيوانية والصحة النباتية بكل مجالاته، بالتفتيش في الرقابة على الحدود، في الأدوية البيطرية، في المواد ذات الاستعمال. الصحة النباتية هذا تشرف عليه حصريا وزارة الفلاحة بمفتشيها بهيئاتها بمخابرها. القانون الثالث وهو أساسي وأشمل يتعلق بحماية المستهلك وقمع الغش، تشرف عليه وزارة التجارة الداخلية وضبط السوق الوطنية، هو القانون 09/03 التجارة الداخلية وضبط السوق الوطنية. هو القانون 09/03 المتعلق بحماية المستهلك وقمع الغش. هذا عوض قانون اصدر في سنة 89 يعني تحليل. احنا العمل اللي نقوم به أولا إعداد، تقييم، تحسين ومراجعة وفقا للمواصفات الدولية. هذا القانون حدد عدة إلزاميات اللي هي حقوق المستهلك. حقوق المستهلك في الجزائر أصبحت حق دستوري. هذا التحيين منذ دستور 2020 نص صراحة بأن حقوق المستهلك وحمايتهم أصبح حق دستوري، المادة 62 من الدستور. هذا القانون واش حدد؟ الإلزاميات نذكرهم بسرعة. إلزامية مطابقة المنتوج قبل عرضه في السوق، مستورد أو منتج محليا. إلزامية سلامة الغذاء، كل ما يتعلق بالمضافات، أمن المنتوج، الخصائص الميكروبيولوجية، كل هذه القواعد أسس عليها وهي إلزام. كل مخالفة لها القانون فيه عقوبات تترتب عليه. الآن ما هو الجانب الهيكلي؟ نخلي لك وقت.
So I will attempt really to share really what Nurdin has shared with us. It's quite important because he went through the foundations of the food safety system in Algeria, indicating that the food safety system is based on 5 key pillars: legislation and secondary legislation in the form of regulations. Second pillar related to the organization, so essentially the roles and responsibilities of the competent authorities. A third pillar related to conformity assessment. A fourth pillar is the inspection system, and a fifth pillar related to communication, but communication in the sense of awareness raised as part of consumer protection. And this is done also in collaboration with the consumer protection organizations. From a legislative standpoint, there are 3 key pieces of legislation that Nurdin mentioned. one legislation related to animal health, 8808, one legislation related to plant health, 8717, and basically these legislation cover all the various aspects related to all what matters to plant health and animal health, including the inspections, setting national policies, management of veterinary drugs, and these legislations are administered by the Ministry of Agriculture. There's a third key piece of legislation pertaining to consumer protection and including actually aspects related to food safety, and that's under the responsibility of the Ministry of Internal Commerce. And this legislation, if I noted right, is 0903. And basically, it encompasses various aspects of consumer protection. And Nuruddin emphasized that consumer protection is right now a constitutional right since the Constitution of 2020. But it includes various aspects, all the requirements of food safety, management of food hygiene, additives, packaging material or food contact material, and now he's going to be speaking about the organizational in Algeria. I've learned a lot, by the way. Personally.
بما يخص التنظيم الهيكلي، تكلمنا على وزارة الفلاحة، فيها السلطة البيطرية، السلطة الصحة النباتية، مخبر وقاية النباتات، مخبر الطب البيطري، ومفتشيات في الولايات وفي الحدود. الآن نتكلم على وزارة التجارة على المستوى المركزي، مديرية الجودة وحماية المستهلك اللي أشرف عليها أنا شخصيا مع الفريق يعني اللي نعمل معاه. المهمة الأساسية نتاعها هي إعداد التنظيم والتشريع المتعلق بسلامة الأغذية بالتنسيق مع مصالح وزارة التجارة، بالتنسيق مع القطاعات الوزارية الأخرى، بالتنسيق أيضا احنا نشرك أيضا المهنيين، القطاع الخاص، وأيضا جمعيات حماية المستهلك من بداية المشروع. المرسوم التنفيذي رقم 16 199 حدد المواد هذه المعلومات. ايضا مشروع اخر اخرى على تحديد التقليديه في الجزائر. تكلمنا احنا على لوتونتيسيتي اصاله المنتوجات، هذا راح يسمح لنا ايضا. ممكن تقول لي هذا المنتوج معروف علميا مده صلاحيته، ولكن هذا المنتوج عنده خصوصيه جزائريه، لكن هذا راح يعطينا فتره زمنيه لصلاحيه المنتوج. انا كمشرع هذا المنتوج راح نعمل نص راح نحددها له خصوصيه جزائريه. هذا بعجاله فقط، في كثير لو نتكلم ممكن ياخذ وقت، ولكن هذا باش نربط باللي في ابتكار فيه العمل كخلاصه ممكن نقولها السي صموال. الابتكار والتكنولوجيا الحديثه والذكاء الاصطناعي ومتطلبات الصناعه والامن الغذائي يحتم على المشرع يكون يسمع للمبتكرين للعلم الوطن وعلى مستوى دولي باش يواكب يدير.
I'm just going to complete under the ministry oversee. There is also a rapid alert system that is the Codex Contact Point is actually overseen by the same directorate. Now, Nurdin was mentioning that we were wondering why Algeria does not necessarily have a single agency, but Algeria has actually a national strategy or to 2036. As part of the requirements of this strategy is really to ensure enhanced inspection capacity and that is, and I translated it as the National Health Security Agency, which is not actually about food safety alone. It's all the various aspects of health security. And this agency or organization reports directly to the president of the Republic. Now, Nurdin mentioned that as part of the efforts to ensure that the system in Algeria relies on the best available science, there is a partnership with the Ministry of Higher Education and Research, and there is a network of research that have been devoted to supporting food safety, nutrition, food quality projects. And he mentioned a couple of outputs that have been achieved as a result of this partnership. So, for example, the development of a national food composition database that surveys the composition of food products in Algeria. By the way, this is a key element in any type of activity related to food consumption. If you don't have a food composition database, the two are really key ingredients in order to support exposure assessment. It's also helping in a number of policy initiatives, such as, for example, the development of a front of pack labeling initiative in Algeria. There is another project related to technologies of food handling or food processing with the intent to preserve the nutrition quality of food, and that is dedicated to provide Algerian produce best practices in this particular area. Also, he mentioned an initiative related to offering more guidance on the use by date for traditional Algerian products, basically not necessarily guidance like to learn more about the system in the Gambia. Would you mind actually giving us an overview of the way the system is set up, organized, and deployed?
Good afternoon, everyone. The Gambia is a small country of 11,000 square kilometers only, divided by a complete river, beautiful country. And it just looks like one of the parasites that I have studied so much in my career, which is the trypanosome. For those of you in the veterinary field, it wreaks a lot of havoc in the continent. The Gambia had a very diverse structure 15 years ago. The food safety was distributed amongst ministries and departments and agencies. So at the time, we decided to have or create using best practice, that's the Food Safety and Quality Authority. It was created in 2011. So, and then it started operations in 2013. So it's fairly young, but a lot of processes were done. And of course, we faced a lot of challenges in setting it up, because what we did was we brought all the aspects of food safety from all these departments, ministries, into one agency. You can imagine there was a lot of resistance. People were so reluctant to give up some of their responsibilities because it meant some financial gains. It meant also some employment and other aspects. So, but we succeeded. We were supported by the government, thankfully. And then we succeeded in actually creating the Food Safety and Quality Authority. Now, at the authority is structured in this way. The act is very elaborative. It brings all these structures for inspection, for codex, and all these things are actually in the law. For SPS and everything is in the law. So that actually has covered the authority in its mandate. The legal framework is very strong and is very robust. Now, we have a structure in such a way that for us to be a little bit autonomous, like not being influenced by some of the ministries, agriculture, health, fisheries, trade, etc. Then we were taken out from all these government structures and put right under the office of the vice president. So we are under the office of the vice president and we report to the vice president directly. Now, the vice president also briefs the president accordingly and cabinet of our actions, our policies, and so on. Now, under that, we have a regulatory. That board actually advises the vice president and the government directly on food safety matters. What we did was we took the role of the Codex Committee, National Codex Committee, which does a lot of food safety advisory to the government. And after that, of course, directors, board of directors is a unique way of setting up. The board of directors has no government representative, zero. It has zero government representative. That is the board, that independent board, and it comprises the that's predominantly we have the farmers platform representing. Because Gambia is also a tourism destination, so there are also the tourism representative. So the transport unit, because the transport logistics, so represented also to protect its interests. And we also have the consumer association not from the main government, but from the civil society association, also represented in the board. So there is a diversity of members appointed by and is also not a government official, but an independent consultant or independent person. So this is how the structure works. And then once we have the board, then we created the scientific committee because the institution is doing risk management and risk communication. But the risk assessment bit is done by that independent committee. We call them the scientific committee. So they do the risk communication. And this is how the structure fits. So then we do the risk communication. And also we have a stakeholder consultative forum, which is also part of the legal requirement. So therefore, we want an institution that is highly consultative. And in the consultation of that, then we have some of the government agencies that are of relevant stakeholders. We also have predominantly the private sector, actually, which are the stakeholder consultative committee, from the cashew nuts, from the groundnuts corporation, from all walks of life. They are in the stakeholders forum. Then we also have the SPS committee that's looking after all SPS matters, plant protection issues, the certification issues, and other compliance issues. Then that is the committee that is looking at SPS matters. So these are the statutory, and they're all statutory. That means they are lawful the structures. Then after them, they also report to the board. Then we also have the National Codex Committee. Like I said, that's taking the place of the advisory and all codex matters. Then we have the, I think those are the four structures that we have. And then they all report to the board. And every quarter, they report to the board of directors. And then now the authority falls under the board of directors. We do the risk management issues. And under the structure of the organization, we have the director of scientific affairs. They do the risk assessments, they do the testing, they do the other issues related to the scientific work and risk management issues. They also formulate some of the regulations based on the scientific aspect. Then they feed to we have also a head of regulatory affairs who is basically a lawyer by profession and grounded in food safety matters and in trade issues, so that at least once our regulations are being formulated, there are all these are consulted, and then before the regulations are or validated, we do the notification, the usual WTO notification, so that member countries can also add value. And actually, we started using the guideline, the food safety, harmonization of food safety regulation guideline developed by CC Africa, like Samuel was referring to. We used it before it was even adopted at Codex. We started using it in all our regulations so that we are harmonizing our regulations within the continent and also adopting best practices. Because some of our regulations, when we notify at the WTO level, we get comments also outside Africa, which is also value addition for us. Then we have the Food Control Directorate, which we have various units. We have the inspectorate, certification, and other issues that are actually on food. Of course, the regulatory is also responsible, food fraud, traceability, and other issues. Now, the scientific, the food control is mostly for inspection, certification, and they are responsible for all the border control, also responsible for other forms of inspections, and also setting up hygiene and other looking at for food contaminants, etc., etc. So this is how we are structured, and we report directly to the vice president. We report every three months, every quarter. We have a session with the vice president himself, and we sit and we give all our reports, and then they ask questions, and so that he can also take some of our points to cabinet, and cabinet will review and adopt some of them. So this is the structure. So we are young and we have predominant and young people and below part. So it's a young organization and we have like and I saw Dr. Tariq awarding a lot of women. I think this direction I'm also trying to do with them.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ba, for this great overview. And again, as I think you indicated, the question is not a question of the size of the country or the organization. It's really the effectiveness and the willingness of its people really to serve the food control system. And we once again actually congratulate you for your accession to be the coordinator for Africa. And we are very thankful for your commitment and your participation in this forum. Because again, for full disclosure, Dr. Ba was actually participating at another event in Entebbe, and he coupled basically that responsibility to come and join the African Food Regulatory Authorities Forum. So again, very thankful to that. We would like to benefit also from learning from another young, as it was identified, young food safety agency in the continent, and that is the Food Safety Agency in Mauritania, newly created. Dr. Mohammed, you are with us. Please provide us with an overview of the way the Mauritanian system works and the role of the agency. Please feel to do it in Arabic and I will help to translate in English. Thank you.
شكرا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحن في موريتانيا تم إنشاء الوكالة الموريتانية للسلامة الصحية 2023. خلال 2023 كانت الوكالة في إعداد تشريعية 24 اكتملت النصوص التشريعية واستلمت مهامها في 2025. إذن أنا اليوم تقريبا ما يناهز 11 شهر كمدير عام للوكالة الموريتانية. قمت باستراتيجية كوني أحد كوادر وزارة الصحة، خلفيتي متخصص في القلب الاصطناعي، جراحة القلب، وأعرف ما في بلدي من مشاكل صحية تتعلق بالغذاء، فحاولت أن نتدخل تدخلا فنيا لعلي وأن نخفض الأمراض الموجودة سواء كانت في أمراض القلب أو سواء كانت في الأمراض السرطانية. رغم أنني لم نكن على اتصال مباشر بين الهيئات المتخصصة في سلامة الأغذية، كان لي الشرف أن شاركت في مؤتمر عمان ولاحظت الخلفية. في رمضان الماضي قمت باستراتيجية وهي عبارة عن استجلاب معدات من إحدى الدول الأوروبية. هذه المعدات تساهم في التشخيص الأولي في الذكاء الاصطناعي، لأنني وجدت المفتشين لدينا 14 مفتش كانوا يقومون بزيارات للمطاعم والأسواق لكن بالحواس الطبيعية. فقلت أن هذا الأمر لا بد أن تكون التكنولوجيا والرقمنة ضافت إضافة جديدة، وبالتالي استجلبت هذه المعدات وهي كانت عبارة عن معدات صغيرة لكنها مهمة تعطي نسبة التلوث بدرجة أولية. وإذا ما حصلت هذه النتائج نأخذ منها عينات ونبعث بها إلى مخابر، لدينا 4 مخابر تحديدا، نقوم بفحص هذه المواد ونلاحظ توصياتنا للحكومة. نحن نعمل تحت وصاية وزارة التجارة والسياحة الموريتانية. هذه العمل قمنا بمسح جميع التراب الوطني من الأسواق الكبرى والمتاجر والمطاعم. حاولنا أن في هذه السنة أن نزور 4100 وحدة أو منشأة صحية. قمنا بالتعطير والتثقيف للتجار أو للمستهلكين وخاصة الذين يتعاملون مع المواد الغذائية من بيع. فلاحظت إشكال في المواد الغذائية. موريتانيا تقريبا تستورد من نظامها الغذائي ما يناهز 60%. فلاحظت أهمية وجود الوكالة الموريتانية على الحدود من أجل فحص المواد الغذائية قبل أن تصل إلى الأسواق لتقترب من المستهلك. ولاحظت أيضا أن هذه تحتاج مواد تشريعية، وتحتاج في الحقيقة الحكومة أن تساهم في هذا الشيء، ضبط المواد الغذائية عند الحدود. ثم التخزين، إشكالية التخزين لاحظت أنها إشكالية كبرى. في المواد الغذائية حسب ما بحثت لا بد لها من تخزين خاص، من حرارة خاصة، من أرضية خاصة، من رطوبة خاصة، وبالتالي لا يمكن أن تخزن المواد الغذائية مثلا في المواد اللا غذائية، فينبغي أن يكون هناك أماكن تخزين. ثم كانت هناك إشكالية نقل المواد الغذائية من السوق إلى المستهلك أو من المعابر إلى الأسواق. لا بد أن تكون هناك سيارات خصوصية لنقل هذه المواد تتغير مع درجة الحرارة أو تغير درجة الحرارة داخليا من أجل سلامة المواد الغذائية. هذا الأمر حاولت أن نقرب الحكومة وإلى البلد بصورة عامة، وبالتالي كانت سنة من العمل الميداني وقمنا بما يسمى بترميم مختبر خاص للوكالة الموريتانية سيدشن قريبا. هذا في الحقيقة أعطانا صورة واضحة أن عمل الوكالة الموريتانية للسلامة الصحية في موريتانيا أنه ضروري، لكن تبقى وكالة ناشئة وتمد يدها للإخوة من جميع أقطار العالم أن يمدها بما لديهم من في الحقيقة قدرات لتنشئ هذه الوكالة وتسير على أقدام علمية صحيحة حتى تنقذ الإخوة في موريتانيا. أنا شاكرا لكم وأشكركم جيدا، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Just wanted to actually confirm some of the credentials of Dr. Mohammed. In fact, Dr. Mohammed introduced himself. So he's the newly appointed Director General for the Food Safety Agency in Mauritania. He's actually original expertise. He's a medical doctor. He's actually a heart surgeon specialized in heart transplants. And essentially, he started his intervention by mentioning the importance of food as a contributor to chronic disease and the importance of reduction of risk factors to these chronic disease, whether be it cardiovascular or cancer or other issues. And in fact, that he takes humbling responsibility as part of an effort to increase the protection of Mauritanian consumers. So emphasize the fact that the agency is still a young agency, benefiting from only 14 inspectors and moving gradually in its ability to perform. Moving, for example, its inspection system from a sensory inspection to equipment-driven inspection. And in fact, the agency has acquired most recently equipment for its inspectors to be able to conduct inspection in various establishments. He emphasized the importance of what I call soft compliance myself. So this is my own translation in the sense that the agency has been in touch with, if I counted correctly, 4,100, so 4,100 establishments, mainly attempting to provide awareness, food safety culture propagation to these producers to really sensitize them to the importance of food safety. He identified some key issues that the agency is now looking at, considering the fact that Mauritania relies heavily on food imports, the need to have, but also the importance of setting requirements for food storage. A lot can happen to a food during storage, and there needs to be better guidance around that. Dr. Mohammed also mentioned the recent investment in a national laboratory that will be supporting the National Food Safety Agency in Mauritania. And he reiterated the fact that despite it being young, it has great aspirations, and the agency is looking for all the partnership and collaboration from its partners in Africa and elsewhere. So once again, thank you, Dr. Mohammed, for this update, and all the best of luck in the implementation of all your duties and the requirements to protect Mauritanian consumers. Dr. Patricia from Capo Verde, a brief update, if you don't mind. on the situation in Cape Verde. Thank you.
Bon, je vais parler un peu du système de contrôle officiel au Cap-Vert. Pour commencer à dire que le Cap-Vert, c'est un petit pays de l'Afrique. C'est un archipel de 10 îles. La population, c'est la moitié d'1 million d'habitants. Au Cap-Vert, on a un système de plus d'autorités compétentes. On a commence pour le deux autorités compétentes de la production primaire, l'agriculture et la pêche, comme je disais avant, importer pour le produit, surtout pour ça. L'agriculture et la responsabilité de la maire, mais c'est l'autorité compétente pour la gestion et certificat de produits. On a aussi le ministère du Commerce et Industrie, que c'est responsable faire de et on a l'entité de régulation de dépendance de la santé, où je viens, que c'est la responsabilité de la régulation des produits pharmaceutiques, l'établissement de santé, mais aussi les produits alimentaires. L'agence indépendante, cette agence, c'est la responsabilité de toute la réglementation, fait la proposition au gouvernement sur tous les produits alimentaires, fait la supervision du marché. Quand je parle de la supervision, je parle de la monitorisation du marché avec l'analyse laboratoire et aussi l'inspection des établissements. Et c'est l'entité responsable pour réussir tout international. On est le point focal de RAF, le réseau de l'Union européenne, beaucoup important de l'Union européenne, et aussi de InfoSan, que c'est le Food Safety, et aussi on est un point focal de Code Defense. Pour dire que tout les recommendations le parce qu'on voulait beaucoup d'autorités compétentes dans le pays. J'ai que
of food, conseil for food, that actually includes all the various authorities. So this is the way the coordination is done, but including also academia, consumers, and basically what Patricia mentioned is that recently benefiting from the support of STDF, the Standards and Trade Development Facility, as capacity building